Welcome to this week's episode of Tell Me More. We're in the studio and we're talking about joy. How do we get it? What is it? How do we keep it? How do we share it with others? It's a really fun conversation and we're glad you're here.
Welcome to Tell Me More. I'm Luke Stehr, not Kurt Grice, who was with us last time.
Was that just last week?
That was...
Okay.
And I was actually the host last week. I did the welcome.
Listeners, tell us how you like that.
Yeah.
Just,
Come on.
Call us, tweet us, like, subscribe.
I didn't punch any buttons. I didn't touch the board. That was
we
Kurt.
have gotten far away from punching buttons.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's fun, but
I mean the sounds.
I'm not an elaborate person.
I mean the fun sounds.
Oh, the fun sounds? They're not turned up.
They're muted right now.
We have to let our producer know when we have used those, because otherwise they don't make it into the podcast.
Oh.
So I could punch one right now, but
It does nothing.
it does nothing.
Okay.
No need.
So
No need. Well,
Womp womp.
today, I got the joy, 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 joy down in my heart.
Where?
Down in my heart.
Where?
Down in my heart.
Oh, God, I love it. Not out there.
I learned that at the Methodist VBS.
Did you really? Look at you.
I guess I learned it along the way.
Look at you.
And anything I learned until I was 18 was the Methodist. So that's not all true.
Fair point.
Anyway.
Little Nehemiah.
You preached about joy.
I did.
Yeah.
I did. You know?
Yes.
I just think that in the journey of rebuilding, which I think has, it can be tedious because I think it's not just a straight line ascent, if you will. It is filled with challenges and valleys and setbacks and obstacles and distractions. And I think that I'm just grateful that this experience happened to the Israelites at the water gate where they have this revival, and Nehemiah and Ezra and the priests remind them, today's a day to celebrate the joy of the Lord is your strength, not a day to mourn or grieve. And so just want to encourage our people to tap into the joy that the Lord gives us. That is, I'm in the middle of another study. I'm always in the middle of another study, I feel like. But right now I am studying
Tell us more.
Human flourishing.
Oh.
And one of the, in the research that's been done on human flourishing, which we're going to be unpacking for our church, is gathered right now from a sociological point of view by Harvard and Baylor around these domains of reality. And one of those is happiness and life satisfaction. And, I was taught growing up theologically that happiness and joy were two very different things. Happiness is more surface level. It's more circumstance connected.
But you said Sunday that they belong to the same semantic domain.
The semantic domain, biblically at least.
Which is a phrase I've never used before.
Oh, really? Yeah.
To be honest.
The clusters,
Well, I get it. I just, it's not my vocabulary.
Yeah. But
it is now.
But the domains of reality
semantic domain.
Now it's in my semantic domain.
Well, these researchers are studying is happiness, life satisfaction. Well, actually, I've been researching. I'm going to be preaching on happiness next year, and I actually believe there's first of all, just a profound connection. I don't know that you can draw as clear a line of distinction as I had been led to believe biblically. And I think there's nothing wrong with allowing circumstances when they're good to produce something positive in your life. There's nothing surfacey about that. That's just
Is that what you would call
reality.
happiness?
Well, I would say yes, but I think happiness is also an expression of joy in some ways. So I think they're connected. So I'm in the middle of researching all that. Stay tuned.
Because you're kicking off 2025 with the Beatitudes,
I am.
right?
So
Which start with
blessed.
the Greek word is
Makarios.
Makarios.
So how do you
translate that? And what does it mean?
Well, it depends on where it is.
Well, if it's the beginning of a beatitude, what would you say?
Depends on who you ask.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah, okay, we can wait till January.
But the blessed life is a happy life. It's a joy-filled life.
Yeah.
The joy-filled life is a blessed life.
But it's not,
But
what am I trying to say?
It's not flippant, though.
No.
And it's
I
not
mean, was Jesus happy?
prosperity, that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, was Jesus happy?
most of the time? I mean, is that
so.
fair?
I mean, he's cheerful.
Was he? But he was.
He was winsome.
But he was sad. We know that.
He did. He had episodes, but he also, he said about himself that John the Baptist came playing a funeral dirge, and you don't like that, and the Son of Man came eating and drinking, and you don't like that. So he contrasted himself to John the Baptist.
He self-described that way, right?
And
so I do have a question for this that I guess I was going to wait till later in the podcast somehow. But
here we are.
Yeah, we're going to kick it off. So when we think about joy, I mean, sometimes my camp is care in the church. I'm the care minister. So I often intersect people's lives when it's not the happiest day of their life or season of life.
Right.
I'm saying about tonight, we have grief share divorce care. Right. We have, I think, broken a record on just the amount of funerals in a short amount of time.
We have.
So when you think about joy, I'm not saying these people can't experience joy. I think they do. I think it's actually there for them. But if you call joy an emotion, I might be using the wrong word for that. But I guess there's this reality where I would say, and the question is, can you hold two things at once? Because although our people, who I can name and see and kind of cast around the table that I'm talking about right now, I believe they have access to inner joy, but their life also is very heavy. Yeah. And they wouldn't necessarily be happy with their circumstances, with their life. And so can you hold two things at once? Where is joy in the midst of really hard stuff? How do you balance those?
What a great question. Think about the Beatitudes.
Tell me
Blessed
more. Oh, okay. We're going back to January.
Who mourn. I mean, so what does blessed mean?
Yeah.
So obviously it's not something flippant. If it's a reality.
And it acknowledges that you can be mourning.
Correct.
And still be joyous in this. What I'm trying to get across here.
Happy in some places.
It definitely can have that connotation.
It would be semi-legitimate to translate the Beatitudes as happy are those who mourn.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is very conflicting in our parlance.
Yes.
Because of how we view happiness.
Yeah.
I think part of this is we haven't given a lot of breadth, I think, in American culture and maybe American Christianity even for the complexity of emotional life. I think there's still parts and swaths of church life, and I think about this sometimes like, oh man, I'm angry, and we automatically connect anger to sin. And it's very easy to sin while you're angry, but you can be angry and sin not, as the Bible says. Jesus did.
Some therapists would say anger is masking a deeper emotion. So let's do some reflection. Mostly men. No offense.
I don't know that we always grapple with the complexity of just human emotion in general, which I think the more time you spend walking alongside people through a variety of life circumstances, that
it's
there
funny,
is a complexity to.
Because I don't mean, I hope I'm adding to and not taking away from what you're saying. I talked to, he wouldn't mind me being named, being Raymond Masad, who's one of our leaders in our church, trusted ministry. He's a chaplain, and he's of Lebanese heritage. And I was talking to him about the different ways that different cultures mourn. Because we're hosting a memorial service that has mostly Lebanese culture in it. So I wanted to make sure we were honoring what's appropriate, And Kurt and I went and made sure they had refreshment because I thought maybe that was important for them. We had talked a little bit about that. And he's a chaplain at Mansfield Methodist, and he was saying the different cultures when he is there in their times of death, he was naming the different cultures and how much time they give to the grieving process, even in the moment of he said Caucasian American, it might be like 10 minutes when they're, their loved one has passed. And then they're like, okay, well, I need to go get on with whatever. And not that they wouldn't have a service later or whatever. But he said Taiwanese culture is the longest, and it's a 6-hour, like the hospital. They're not going to leave the room for 6 hours because they have a process and a grieving and, all that to say, I think sometimes we bypass a lot of that. Yeah. We, in our kind of American ways and society, some do it better than others, but Protestant Americans are not, I would not say highly ranking in terms of
we do that
camping out there.
With the positive, air quote, emotions like joy. And kind of the thing that helps me, the illustration I have in mind is Anthony Bourdain used to have a show where he traveled to different countries and sampled different foods. And there's one he went to Denmark, and he's talking to this famous chef in Denmark. And this chef is talking about how because of Lutheran culture, there was this idea that if you enjoyed food too much, if you experienced too much joy, that was actually sinful. So food should be plain and simple and not bring about basically high levels of enjoyment. And so if you think about the fact that
How utilitarian.
a very utilitarian approach.
Yeah.
We shouldn't experience too much joy. That's not just like Danish Lutheranism. That carries through German Lutheranism that then migrates into the U.S. That's British Puritanism would have a similar slant. So like if you think about our cultural heritage here in the United States, we actually, I felt joy. Okay, not too much.
Yeah. There's a little meme that's like a Catholic school, and it's if you're happy and you know it, it's a sin. Like is that it's like little kids.
What have you
Yeah.
done
If you're
wrong?
happy and you know it, it's a sin. Go to confession. Stop.
But we don't just bypass grief or sadness. We tend to bypass joy as well, I think.
Yeah.
And I guess the image I have of joy, I didn't talk about this
Is inside
Sunday,
out.
but but it's, I guess the way I view it is it's the difference between our posture and gesture. I think we have gestures for a whole range of emotions, a whole range of life experience. So there's when the Bible says there's a time to be sad and a time to be, time to mourn, a time to weep, time to cry, time to laugh, whatever. But I think our general posture is one of a deep, abiding sense of joy. But the gesture of sadness and, the embracing of reality of brokenness and loss, as opposed to our gesture being joy and our posture always being one of loss. It's kind of the way I think about it. And so I try to maintain that posture myself of joy, of this abiding reality of the presence of God. I think good theology helps with that, to be honest with you.
Go on.
Yeah,
Tell us more.
because,
Why would good theology make a difference?
Well,
in this case.
I think theology helps me develop the right lenses through which I can focus all of reality. And so if I'm able to embrace theologically a sense of eternity and God's original design and God's plan and God's hope and God's provision for us, then that gives me an ability to develop a certain posture. And so,
Like you said Sunday, the joy of the Lord is our future.
that's right.
So if
It
you
is.
believe that theologically,
It is.
then it
That's
might
right.
color what you're doing.
Exactly.
Does that feel right?
So it doesn't mean, that you don't engage reality. It doesn't mean, as I said Sunday morning when we heard Beth Moore one time say that when someone said, you're just not as funny as you used to be, and then she said, well, life's not as funny as it used to be. Well, Cindy and I have had a chance to live a little bit of life, and that's just
You're still pretty funny, just so you know,
but that's the case. I mean,
from my POV.
life, can it puts a few dents in your fender. You know what I mean? It's just that. But I would be honest enough to tell y'all, I'm happy driving my car with some dents in the fender because I trust it. I've been through the storms in it, and I believe in it. I know how it responds, and so, but it's not robbed me of my joy, and I think it's because my theology is so secure, and it's built around just a relational connection with God, and so it keeps me grounded in a perspective where I trust the Lord. Now, I don't always, I don't always understand why things are happening the way they happen, and it can cause what I would say are gestures of challenge and confusion and anxiety. I have that some, but that's just not my posture. And I think maybe, I don't know, maybe you could argue that that's just a part of my makeup. Some people are a little more melancholy than others. I don't know that I'm smart enough to figure all that out. But I would just say I do think there's a certain choice that comes with this. That's what I tried to communicate Sunday morning, which I do think is a little hard for some people, that you can choose to be joyful. Like when Habakkuk says that about there's no sheep in the pens, there's no cattle in the stall, there's no grapes on the vine. Well, it's easy to read that, and he says, yet nevertheless, I'm still going to express my joy in the Lord. But I believe he meant
choice.
He meant that. He's saying, okay, I'm not basing everything in how I'm going to experience all this on what I'm getting out of this. And to me, that's if you do that, as I said Sunday, you're putting your joy in someone else's hands. And I just think that's a precarious thing to do, to trust something else around me and someone else around me to bring my joy to me. Now they can bring blessing and add texture to my life. And I mean, my goodness, my grandkids, we should have had them first actually, but they, y'all know that Ada Lee, Adler, Connor, Joshua, Gideon, these children, as I've watched them experience them, like the other night we went to Ada's first orchestra concert. We're just now learning to play the violin. And, so when she's up there on the platform behind this curtain, they open the curtain, and when she looks out, she sees us, and I mean, this big grin, and then just kind of a little wave. And
how does that make you feel?
Oh, and I was just like, I just love
pretty
that.
great.
I just love that girl so much, And I had a little Adler with me, and Adler's in my lap, and then Gideon's on the other side of me, and Gideon's tugging at my arm, hey Poppy. And I just thought,
life is good.
I just love all this. It's joyful, I don't put all my hope and joy in it, but there's nothing wrong with allowing it to bring some things to me. But that doesn't sustain me during the dark days. It's not my relationship with my grandchildren. It's my relationship with God that creates the posture for me. And so that's the way I've tended to think about it. Yeah. And I think that's what I mean by choice. You can choose to build that posture, and I think it takes time. Maybe there are predispositions toward it.
I think we have to acknowledge that, right? Everybody's nature versus nurture, whatever you want to do.
Like I was reading a sermon on joy.
You're one of the happiest and most optimistic people I've ever worked with. Period. Maybe I've ever known, and I could name others who are not wired that way. Right. But sometimes life shapes us, and our own discipleship shapes us, right? To be.
Yeah, I mean, my best shot in golf is my next one, because I keep thinking this. Okay, I didn't hit that very well, but I'm pretty sure I can hit this 9-iron. So I'm pretty excited about getting. We
did First Steps class on Sunday, and I don't think I'm oversharing this, Dr. Wiles. I'm sorry if I am, but somebody who was thinking about joining our church said something like, "Is the pastor going to retire anytime soon?" Because it's a reasonable question, it's a thoughtful question. Yeah. And Kurt Grice gave the best. No is the answer, just so everybody. I mean, no is the short answer, but. Kurt was like, he's not slowing down. He thinks he has like the naivety to think his next sermon's his best sermon, his next season's his best season. So it's not just golf. Kurt did in classic Kurt Grice fashion. It was, no, he actually, has the audacity to believe that his next season here is the best season here, Did he? It was certainly the spirit in which it was given. But I would like to say that Luke and I nodded along agreeingly. So. It turns out we agreed to it. Yeah. Well, I don't think that's so. I mean, if rumor was spreading, we've squelched it. So
I do have that perspective, and I was reading a sermon on joy by John Mark Comer, who we were talking about earlier before we started recording.
Yeah, y'all like him, and I haven't read him.
Yeah, but he's
even Addison, our videographer, has read him and liked him. So I know I will read it by next year.
Before I see Jurassic Park. Hey, I got my...
It's a race.
I mean, if that's all it takes.
Hey, I got my photo made in front of the Jurassic Park.
I know, how dare you. The audacity to take your picture with the Jurassic Park logo.
His word of the day is audacity.
Is there
the audacity of joy.
That domain, within that particular domain?
Is it N.T. Wright that talks about the audacity of hope? Is that him?
Maybe. I don't know.
But the audacity of joy is a compelling statement, a compelling phrase, because in some ways we ought not, right? Except for this eternal perspective, this posture of gratitude and sustaining hope that gets us to a place of joy. Like it's actually a really good phrase.
Joy is an act of defiance, which often it is.
Yeah, it's good.
But I do think the reality is...
It might have been Obama. The audacity of hope. I'm going to Google it. Yeah. It's going to bother me. Y'all keep going.
It's Obama or N.T. Wright?
It's either very theological or just very inspirational.
No, Nostradamus. Who was it that said it? I don't know.
I think it's
Hey Siri.
Nietzsche?
Y'all keep talking. I think the audacity of hope is a Barack Obama autobiography.
Right. But what I was going to say is about Comer, though, he says about himself that he's generally melancholy. And I was just reading this exegesis of joy by him. And he said, I've had to learn. I gave that quote from him Sunday where he said, I don't do this because I'm disciplined. I do it because I'm desperate. And I think he was speaking out of just his general posture. The audacity of hope is Barack Obama.
Now we're going to get a picture of you like that, and it's called the audacity of joy. Dennis R. Wiles. Okay, sorry. Keep going.
I realize that, when you talk about joy stealers, as I talked about Sunday morning, there are so many things that steal our joy. I tended to look addressed that Sunday morning theologically, that this world and the sinful nature and obviously Satan, I do believe that about Satan. I think that that's one of his chief desires is to just completely rob us of all of our joy because, if you pull the joy out of what we do, you lose heart. And to me, that is a challenge. And so when I deal with people who are struggling, who've lost heart, it's always a challenge to help them rebuild and restore all of that, in their own personal life. The good news is you can do it, and there's a reason to do it because this world's not all there is.
Right.
Now, that doesn't mean I don't live in this world. Y'all know me. I'm very much in this world. I'm an earthy guy. This is my life, and I'm grateful to God for it.
Monks. We don't retreat from the world.
Right. But you've got to, if you meet it all head on, hopefully, if you've got that strong, secure posture, to me, it's resilient enough, which is what I'm preaching on this coming Sunday. It's resilient enough to withstand those knockdown moments, those temporary seasons of gesture. I just think that when the gesture of despondency becomes your posture, that's when we've got to get
in a
help,
bad spot,
and find a path out, which I do believe therapy helps with.
Call me, fbca.org/care. I've got lots of good resources.
Yes, I just do, because I think sometimes you need that to get you over the hump. And even that whole thing about, I went down a deep hole with the whole sometimes I get off on this neuroscience stuff. When I was in college, I was a psychology major. Eventually, I studied chemistry, mostly chemistry and biology, but I really got into psychopharmacology because I love this whole physiological aspect of psychology and how, if you address something neurologically, it has manifestations behaviorally, And just this whole understanding of how our amygdala works and the fact that negative images just create so much energy in the amygdala of our brains and imprints that so quickly, whereas positive images are much slower for your brain to respond to. Now, who knows why that is, but that's a fascinating idea to me. And so the idea of beginning to practice discipline of allowing these positive images to imprint themselves on your brain. We used to talk about it like this when I was younger, studying therapy in seminary. We had a professor named John Drakeford, and he was a proponent of what was called integrity therapy. It was a little bit controversial back in those days. But anyway, but the phrase was act your way into a new way of feeling. And that's a real simple way to put it. Yeah. But the idea of continuing to focus and dwell on the things that do bring positive imprints into your brain is a discipline. And I never really understood that till I started doing some research, just neuroscience. Well, that actually is the case scientifically. You've got to intentionally focus on these positive things. So I think that's biblical, but I also think it's a choice that we make. And so I would just encourage folks who are listening right now, if you're in that season of despondency, that doesn't mean you're sinful.
No.
That's not what that means. If you're depressed, that doesn't mean you're sinful.
Your body can get sick.
Absolutely.
And your brain is part of your body.
Yes. And there's a whole chemistry that's connected to it all.
And you may need help.
You may need help.
Beyond prayer.
Absolutely.
Respectfully.
Prayer is a part of it.
Pray for you.
Yeah.
And God uses all things. It's not that you're bypassing God to get help in some dark domain that's called counseling. These all work together. Yeah.
But if I have a cavity and a toothache, I don't just pray over it. I actually go to Doug Engel, who is a trained dentist that I know knows what to do and how to help me. Yeah. I always pray for him because I've always been scared of the dentist. Come on.
Of all the dentists, Doug Engel's about the most gentle, kindest person.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, he's
apologizes
a good
every
dude.
time.
He's a good
I'm sorry,
dude.
dentist. I'm going to have to give you this shot.
Yeah.
I'm really sorry. And I always tell him, just don't show me the needle, dude, because I used to do work on mission trips with dentistry. I don't want to see the needle. So he always holds it behind his back, And,
close your eyes, count to 3. Exactly right. Love it.
Because I won't do the gas. I can't get enough gumption to do that because I'm afraid I'm going to miss something. So do not give that to me. Just go ahead and give me the shot.
You're afraid you're going to miss out on life?
I don't know. I'm not sure.
Sure. Well, we can psychoanalyze that another time.
I just can't do that.
Not on the podcast.
Yeah, not today.
We'll respect his
But my point being, I'm going to go to a professional who I know can help me. Well, there are folks who need those kinds of interventions chemically. That's why we have them, and I'm in favor of it. I believe healing comes from God.
It's all God.
But there's also this journey of making these right choices and thinking these right thoughts that are not destructive.
Yeah.
To begin a journey of finding your way to creating a new posture. And that to me is a path forward.
Well, even the New Testament talks about taking every thought captive.
Right.
I mean, there's some sense behind, we can control about what we think about and dwell on.
Back that up, the Bible is so wise. I mean, the patterns you start to think along, which you can choose to continue and embrace the thought or stop it and redirect your attention.
Right.
The thoughts that you think, the more you think them, the easier they get to think. That's what people talk about, neural pathways. I mean, that's how porn addiction works. The more you do porn, the more addicted you become to it. And it's because it actually is reshaping the way your brain
pathways
works.
Yeah.
And so, but it's the same way with negative thoughts. It's the same way with positive thoughts. The more you choose joy, the easier it gets to choose joy. But the flip side is also true. The more you choose to dwell on negative thoughts, negative emotions, the easier it gets for your brain to just keep following those. And again, there's real help that's available if you are stuck and you need it. But there is, if you're struggling. I think one of those more naturally melancholy people. It's work. I have to choose to focus on positive things, think joyous thoughts, follow those joyous thoughts where they go. And the more that I do that, the easier it gets to continue to do that. It's you build those pathways and you keep following them.
And I think there's a spiritual dynamic that also takes place in worship. Worship to me, corporate worship to me, helps cultivate that posture. Even when in worship, even if you're acknowledging lament or sin and confession and repentance, all of those things ultimately lead toward positive experiences with God and with God's people. And so to me, one of the ways to help develop and cultivate that posture of joy is to be a part of the people of God and the regular rhythms of what that means to be a part of the people of God. Because that to me is how you develop some of those regimens, and you're around people that you can learn from. I think that's a great thing to do. And now I know the temptation sometimes, one of the challenges of those of us who are on the joyful end of the spectrum is to be irritating toward those who aren't. And so I've had to learn through the years to modify that myself, to be thoughtful about, is my posture and my general perspective, is it going to, just kind of rub up against someone in a way that is going to negatively affect them? So I try to usually gauge that as I'm in conversation, just to see, are you ready for a dose of joy? Because I have it,
Yeah. But what's it going to do to this situation?
Exactly right. And so you got to be thoughtful because, as we have been through here at our church, we've had numerous deaths in our church's family over the last little bit. They're all different, as they all are. And everybody experiences them differently. And that's why I've tried to coach our people to say, it's okay to say to someone, I don't know what to say to you. You've just lost your husband, or you've just lost your wife, or your mom, or your dad. I wish I knew the right thing to say, but I'll be honest with you, I really don't know what to say, but I just want you to know that I love you, and I'm
not
just
avoiding
right
you.
here.
I'm not avoiding you because I'm not sure what to do.
Because I don't know what to say, because I feel like we need each other. There's nothing wrong with that. That's, I think, even better than saying, well, you know that your so-and-so's in a much better place right now. Really, I'm not. I'm not in a better place. So do we believe they're in a better place if they're a Christian? Of course we do. But in due time and in different ways to communicate those truths.
There's still a book of Lamentations before they came home from exile.
Absolutely. And even in Lamentations, in the scripture, the joy comes in the morning. There's this hope that's woven into it. But I try to be thoughtful how I communicate it one-on-one, because sometimes I know it might be a little overwhelming because I know how I am. But I do believe that buoyant people can be positively influential to those who need a little buoyancy in their life. And so I would say put yourself in some of those situations where you're around some folks who maybe are on the other end of the scale than you are. And I'm talking about reasonable, godly, thoughtful people, okay? And where do you find those? Well, I hope you find them at church. People that have got a good, sound theological perspective, because that makes such a difference. As I said, I think it creates the right posture. And over time, get enough dents in your fender, so to speak, and it creates resiliency. So I don't think my joy is Pollyannish. I don't look at every situation and think this is all going to just work out perfectly. But I will say this, I have a desire for every one of them to.
And you actually believe they could.
I do. I really do.
It may not work out perfectly, but work out.
That's right. I really believe it could have a positive end. I just do. And I'm hopeful, always prayerful, and sometimes try to contribute to it in my own way. But I'm grateful to God for the fact that He's made joy an option. That He's given us sorrow and joy, because I think we need them. We need that profound expression of grief and sorrow. We need to be sad. Of course we do. And we've all had those experiences of sadness and of loss. And there are some things that are so complex that they just are kind of an ongoing sad tale. You look at it and you think, okay, how in the world could this get better? Well, sure, I have some of those in my life, and I have to just deal with them. I have to look at them. But what I've chosen is to not let them ultimately take my joy from me. I've just chosen not to do that. And I don't even know that I would know how to teach that to someone. I think it just becomes a part of who you are. I think what you said earlier is true, Luke. The more you think on those things, so draw near to God, Paul says in Philippians 4, rejoice in the Lord always. Think on these things. There's power.
Well, and you said
it's not a person whose life was simple.
Yeah.
I mean, how many times did Paul get shipwrecked?
Yeah, right.
3.
And he's in prison when he
careful
wrote
to think that the dude writing this just did never have challenges, right? That would be
Paul's life was pretty tough.
Yeah, he earned the right to tell us.
That's right.
That we could be joyful despite our circumstances,
Yeah, and they're saying things to him like he's there in jail in Rome and he's under house arrest. We think, some people think when Paul went to Rome the first time, he's in the Mamertine prison in a dungeon. That's not where Paul was the first imprisonment. He ends up there. First imprisonment, as best we can tell, he's under house arrest. And so there are 2 places in Rome that argue that they are the house where Paul was. One of them has the most.
Yeah, do you believe
tradition.
One of them?
It's
like going to Jerusalem,
100%.
and several people think they know where Jesus was crucified.
Now, you had to be careful in Rome, because Mark Twain said one time after visiting Rome, he said, if I could bring back every piece of the cross that I found in Rome, I could build me a log cabin back here in the United States. So you got to be careful with some of the things that you see. But they're just ancient attestation, of this one house. It's really underground, but that even adds more to the credibility of it, because 2,000 years ago,
it would have been.
It would have been there. And it's on the main thoroughfare. It's called the Via del Corso now. So the main thoroughfare was the Triumph. It was the Road of Triumph in Paul's day. And we believe that's where Paul was, because these inscriptions that are inscribed in the wall that date back to like the 2nd century have Paul and Luke, inscribed on the wall by pilgrims who came there to visit, believing this is where Paul and Luke were, So I'm pretty sure that's where it is. Well, he wasn't in a dungeon chained to to some stone like the Mamertine prison. But he wasn't free to go anywhere. He was under Roman guard and all those kinds of things. So people had to come to him. But they tell him earlier in Philippians, there's people out preaching, about Jesus, and they're just saying all kind of things, and they disagree with you. And he's like, well, whether they do that or not, as long as Jesus is being proclaimed, I'm still joyful. I mean, I'm thinking this guy, it's almost like you would go from this angle. Yeah. Well, Paul, they're saying this about you. I get it. But, actually, as long as Christ is being proclaimed, well, you have no idea if Nero's going to let you go. Well, I know, but I'm going to rejoice. I mean, there's a certain posture there that's encouraged me. And I think that's the biblical approach.
That's kind of the Philippians 4, that I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. A couple verses before, he says, not that I speak from a place of want, for I've learned to be content in all circumstances. Exactly. But he's talking about shipwrecks and imprisonments and being flogged to the point of death. And
I don't know that most of us are facing those circumstances, but one of the things that
probably not shipwrecks.
Yeah. No.
Maybe prison.
I will not be facing a shipwreck because I will not
be
going
get on a ship.
I will not be going on
You'd have to get run over on the way to the harbor by a boat headed there
Dr.
or something.
Wiles will watch Jurassic Park before he goes on a cruise.
That's exactly right.
But I think about
and I will read John Mark Comer Homer, before either of those things happen. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Would to God.
Yeah.
Would to God.
Would to
Katie.
God. I think about the kind of person that I want to be when I'm 80 or 90. You know, and if you're 80 or 90, you can completely disregard my advice.
Yeah.
But
Well, we've got some in our church that
do
could
have
give us
some.
advice. Yeah.
But, you know, do I want to be a stereotypical cantankerous, crotchety old man?
Right.
That's an option.
Which is an option.
It is.
And they don't go to our church.
No.
We don't know a one.
Not a single
Not
one.
a single
Okay,
soul.
continue.
But I want to be someone who at that age is just marked by contentment and joy and peace. And I want to be that kind of compelling figure of joy
Yeah.
at that age. And that's not something you get to at that age by accident.
Yeah.
It's the choices you make throughout your entire life that get you to either cantankerous or joyful or wherever you land in between.
Well, I think
Yeah,
that's
we had an older man in one of my churches that I pastored, one of my churches, church where I served. And he and his wife were never able to have children, and it was painful to them, you know. And he was older when I met him, already retired, been retired a long time. But one day a week, he would just come by the church office. He just wanted to come see us all, and he would always bring ice cream, you know. And so he would just show up, you know, at like 2:00 in the afternoon. And he would just come in with his little bag, and he'd go, hey, and we kind of all knew, hey, man, what's going on, everybody? Got everybody some ice cream? Once he found out what you liked, give me 2 or 3 of your flavors. Well, he would always have, you know, yours taken in the break room and want to help serve it and just kind of stand around and visit with you. How you doing? How's everything going? And I prayed for all of y'all this morning by name, and because I know what kind of ice cream you like. And then every once in a while he'd come by and he'd and see me as the pastor, and he'd say, okay, here's $10,000. You just put this somewhere, and let's just make sure that if somebody comes in here and they just don't know what to do, they don't have anywhere to go, they don't know how to answer what's happening, just take this money right here, Pastor, and just use it. And I just remember one day I said to him, when I grow up, when I'm 80, I want to be the ice cream man. You know, I want to believe that I'm looking at other people and thinking, what might just brighten their day today, you know? And you couldn't say, well, he was like me. He was watching his grandchildren, you know, well, he didn't have any grandchildren, and it was painful.
Yeah.
You know, he talked about it, but it didn't steal the joy from him. He had just this sense of, I want to bless other people. I just think that's also another avenue that leads to the right posture is to maybe let the Lord use you in somebody else's life a little bit. I think that also creates something inside of us. You know, you don't do it for that reason necessarily, I guess, but it certainly engenders something in you, I think, you know. So I don't know. I just think it's possible. It's an option. And I want my church to be filled with joyful people, not flippant people. I don't mean that. I'm talking about that deep, just abiding sense of the presence of God, that you know God's ultimately in control and that his eternal perspective is being worked out, and that somehow we're going to filter into it at some level, some way, somehow. To me, that creates joy.
Amen.
Yeah, I could add more, but why would I? Let's end there. So next week we get to talk about resiliency.
Next week
that's
is
such
resiliency
a good. That's going to be great.
Nehemiah, he leaves for a while. He comes back, and they've already started giving in to stuff, you know. And he looks at them like, "Come on, y'all.
We talked about this.
Yeah, rebuilding. You've got to stay connected."
Classic disciple move.
Right.
So okay.
Well, thanks for listening, everyone, and we'll be back next week.
See y'all.
Thanks for listening to the Tell Me More podcast today. You can subscribe to this podcast on your app of choice, or you can visit us at fbca.org to find out more information about the podcast and our church. Thanks for listening. Have a good day.